Alright, Blender heads, it's just gone, it's a couple of minutes past 11 now, so I figure it's probably about time that make a start on this. This is the first time that I've actually run one of these live stream things here, so you know, bear with me if any kind of weirdness happens here. Looks like we've got a few people in the stream now. This, like I said, this is the first time, so I've got my Blender over on this side, and I've got the YouTube analytics and stuff over on this side. It's saying on one window up here that there's 7 people viewing, but on the same window just a little bit down below it's saying 6. I don't know how many people are currently out there. That's my point. So if you're listening now, throw something up in the comments just so I know that there's people out there. So as you've probably guessed, we're going to be creating this little Hollow Knight character. I don't know whether anybody else has played the Hollow Knight games. I heard about it shortly after it came out, which is probably a couple of years ago, but I only finally just got around to playing it in the last month or so, and my god, it's one of the best games I've ever played. I really feel like I've missed the bandwagon a little bit on this, but really good game, beautiful visuals. So I've been feeling somewhat inspired by it. So I thought, hey, I'll have a crack at making this little character. And considering that we've only got, I've scheduled an hour, but I have booked myself out so that if I need 2 hours to get through this, we've got that time available to us. But he's a relatively simple character. I'm hoping that we can get him done in this amount of time. So, as you can see, I've already gone and gathered a whole bunch of different references. A lot of this was just a little bit of gathering fan art and looking for the actual, ideas. Eventually I found this one on one of the wikis, I think, and I think this will be the main image that we use to actually do our modelling off, because, hey, it's nice, it's front on. And I think most of his shapes are fairly spherical and rounded, so hopefully we don't really need too much of a side view to make this character work. In terms of the final piece, I'm hoping to kind of go for this one. Just because, I don't know whether any of you guys have seen it, but the Minecraft tutorial that I put out a little while ago, I did a whole thing with volumetric lights coming through a tree, and people were like, oh, that was cool. The tutorial wasn't actually about that. It was about how to create the blocks and stuff, but people were really interested in how to do the fog and dust effects, so I thought, oh well, I'll show how to do that in here. So this is also supposed to kind of double as a bit of a Q&A session, so feel free to just throw up comments as we go. Don't feel like you have to wait for anything, ask questions. I have gathered a couple of questions from like the forums and stuff where people ask them early, so every now and then I might interject with one of those, but this should be for the people that are actually here. So if you've got questions, either about Blender in general or specifically about character design, feel free to throw them up whenever. But I guess let's make a start. So I'm going to go and grab this image, which I've got here, and just throw that straight into Blender. It always throws it in looking directly at the camera when you do that, so let's go and reset that to start with and get him rotated, and let's just put him so that he's on the on the 0, 0 axis, so that if we want him to actually be on a ground plane at any point, he'll actually be standing on a ground plane. So body and everything should be fairly straightforward to make. Before the live stream actually started, we were having a bit of a chat with 3D Fan there and contemplating whether or not we sculpt this character or whether we polygon model him. He's such a simple character that I think actually polygon modeling him is probably the faster way to do things. And if we get through him reasonably quick, it means that we can, have a bit more time for Q&A and such. So there'll be parts that I'm going to polygon model, there'll be parts that I'm going to jump into sculpt mode to do. I kind of bounce between the two modes fairly regularly. So this will be more of a, hey, this is how I go about creating characters rather than a specifically let's sculpt this character, and it feels like this image is just ever so slightly off center. There's my 3D cursor, and you can see that his legs aren't the same distance apart. So let's just shuffle him over a little bit so our mirror modifier works a little bit better. Now, in terms of the shape of his actual upper chest, because obviously this reference image here, his cloak is covering all of his upper body and his arms. So we're either going to have to use some of the other references or maybe just do a little bit of guesswork to get that. But, I mean, it does just kind of look like it's a cylinder shape with, you know, a couple of other cylinders coming out of it. So, very simple character. So, let's start off by creating a cylinder. And the 32 is pretty much always too many to start with. So, let's drop this to... I'm going to go 14 and see how that works for us. Now, what's the best way of doing this? You can either jump in and out of wireframe mode or the X-ray mode to kind of be able to see everything a little bit better. But the other alternative is to kind of stick that image out in front, and then you can play with the transparency, and then kind of all of these are reasonable options. I'm going to go and put it behind for now, and if this... What's going on here? And if this kind of gets confusing for you guys to watch, just kind of shout out, because I know that in some of the other recordings I've done, it can be a little difficult to actually see with X-ray on. Like, it's not too bad for me actually doing the modeling, but on YouTube it's not always the best. Now let's set this up so that this reference image here isn't going to get in our way. Let's create a new collection. Let's just go geo for his geometry later, and reference, and toss the reference image in there, and then we can lock the reference image so we can no longer select it. Okay, so with all of that taken care of, let's actually, you know, do some modeling. So let's start by splitting him in half, delete faces, and delete the top and bottom for now. And go and throw a mirror modifier on it as quickly as possible. In fact, in hindsight, one of the problems with a mirror modifier is that it does get a little difficult to kind of scale it initially. I think we can just kind of deal with this. Make sure clipping is on in the mirror modifier, otherwise that can be a bit of a burden. And I'm just going to kind of get that so that it kind of lines up with his legs a little bit there. Just lift it a little bit higher because we will kind of build his groin area a little bit later on. And just kind of make sure that this is going to line up to wherever his neck is going to eventually be. And then I'm just going to add some extra edge loops in there. In fact, let's go an extra one. Just so he's kind of nice and rounded topology here. In fact, I might even add an extra one in there. Okay, that should be a decent start there. Let's go. Now, the initial reaction might be to add either a cylinder or a sphere here, but spheres always have these. Let's just... Oh, it's gone and dumped it into my reference, which I can't select. Always annoying that. It goes in... Anything new that you create goes into whichever collection you've got selected, and it's not always the one that you want it in. Yeah, so spheres have... hang on, let me turn on my wireframe up here. Have the poles here, which can always, when you go and add subdivision modifiers, can create pinching and stuff. I tend not to use spheres for the most part, unless I'm doing like eyeballs or something. So I'm actually going to go and create a cube and go and add a subdivision modifier to that and apply that instead. And then go and cut all of this in half and go back to our front view. Now we can go and put this down here to eventually be his foot. And I know I'm going to basically be using the same geometry later on for his arm, so I might also just go and toss this up here. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go yet, but we'll come back to that. And let's just go and use Control J to join that. And now everything's got a mirror modifier applied to it. So let's get these legs into place. Oops. Just kind of twist these a smidge. And this does seem to have just a little bit of angle to it. Okay, and like we did with the body before, I'm just going to go and add a few extra edge loops, just so we've got some reasonably square geometry. And I might even just bevel that one so that smooths that bend out a little bit. There we go. Now in terms of the arms, let's just go look at some of our other references. Is there anything here we can kind of use as a bit of a guideline to go, that's how long his arms are? And one of the fun things with 2D images is that you can kind of stretch your 2D images and get them to do things that don't always work in 3D. So if you kind of look at the arm here, if you were to fold this down from, bend his arm down, it looks like it would come down to just below his hip, which I mean is fairly normal for human proportions. Obviously he's not human. Whereas if you look at this one and you fold it down, it kind of comes to his waist. But that's kind of what we've got to work with here. It's going to come down around about where you'd expect his hip to be. Whoops, bring back Blender. So somewhere about here is where his hip would be. So I'm actually going to go and grab this little bit of hand here. I'm going to model it down here and then probably put it back up here in a little bit. But this is just to help me get the sizing right. So let's just pull this out, and we know it's going to want to connect somewhere about here. And his arms do seem to be fairly just cone shaped. I mean, this one's got a little bit of bend in them, but when he just throws out his little nail there, you get it's fairly straight arms. So I keep minimizing Blender. Why do I keep minimizing Blender? And I just started Photoshop. Go away, Photoshop. We don't need you right now. So I'm guessing something about that is right. Let's again just go and add a few extra edge loops. And now we can kind of select this. Oh, make sure you don't, if you accidentally put it in the middle, you'll accidentally intersect with the clipping, and that's going to mess things up. So make sure you shift it to the side. And let's actually just put these kind of straight on. We'll go for a T-pose for while we're actually modeling him. Okay, now that we've got that set up, let's work on getting these body parts actually joined. So the way I do this is go and select the edge loop there, and down here we can see that we've got 16 edges, which means, how many edges do we need around here? Oops. That is 12 edges there. Tell me I don't need to go around again. Oops. Okay, so we may need to play with some of our edge loops here to kind of get the right number going through here, but let's start with this. We'll just insert that, and if you've got loop tools enabled, this is kind of a good time to just right click and hit your circle, because that will kind of nicely reshape that. And then we can pull that out. Probably need to scale it down a little bit further. And it might also be worth, oops, rounding this out a little bit as well. Now the cool thing about the loop tools there is that you can now come down here and dial that in if it's a little too much. So I might go for somewhere around 50% just to keep that kind of round, but not completely round yet. let's get rid of those faces. Now, how many edges did we end up with here? We've got 12 edges there, and we've got 16 edges there. So what we need to remove 4 edges from this one. So I mean, the easy way is to kind of do something like that. Let's maybe... Or of course, alternatively, we can add some edges over here. So I think I might start by, let's split that one down there, which probably means that we're going to want to split that one going down there as well. So it gets us to 14. And what if we just go and kind of split another one down the, which one's the center? Through there, that should get us our 16 and 16, and now we can just bridge. You can see that's kind of a little bit messy. This is where I like to jump into sculpt mode. If you just kind of tap that a couple of times with smooth, you get something a little bit nicer. One of the cool new tools that's reasonably new is the slide relax, which if you want to keep the shape that you've currently got but kind of spread your edges out a little bit, it's quite easy to just use this and come in with shift and spread those out. It doesn't like doing edges though. You can see that it still does weird things, so we may need to do that a little bit later once we've joined a few more of these pieces. And you can see that it also doesn't really like the mirror modifier, doesn't really respect that terribly well. Okay, so that's got our arms in. Our arms actually look quite large now, sort of compared to the rest of the body, and I really don't feel like they should be that big. So I may still just kind of shrink these down a little bit. And the nice part about having this in a T-pose now is we can just sort of scale it on the X. And it's going to be pretty close to where we want all of that. It feels a little bit better. Maybe a little bit longer than that. But yeah, that kind of feels like he's keeping more of his cute proportions. Alright, let's see what we can do about getting these legs attached. Now he's got a very boxy, cylinder-shaped body at the moment. He should probably be a little bit more streamlined than that. So I'm just going to go, in fact, let's just so this is a little bit easier, just going to temporarily delete those faces, select the body, and now I can sort of scale this on the Y and just get him thinned out a little bit more. I might even do that to the arms a little bit too. Not as much as the body. And then we can rejoin those. That looks a little bit more like it. Do we have any other references here that kind of suggest how thick he is? Not really. We've kind of got that one, but that's already somebody else's interpretation. So this is probably okay. I might just give him a little bit smaller of a waist. Okay. So let's get his groin area done, because this is a part that a lot of people often forget to put in, and you really need this area to get your deformations working right, you know, through that inner thigh area. So let's just add a few extra edge loops, and then again we're going to have to see how many edge loops do we have here versus how many do we have here. We may need to do a little bit of fiddling around with our edge numbers. I just noticed, creatively bad, are you going to rig this? I am going to need to pose him, but it is going to be a fairly simple pose. Like, we're ultimately going for this. So I'm not sure yet whether I'll actually do a rig or whether I might just use the sculpting tools, or maybe even the key shape tools, just to build him an alternative shape. Again, being such a simple rig, I probably can just sort of throw Rigify at it and get something set up very, very quickly. It certainly wouldn't be, a full-on rig with, any sort of facial controls or anything like that, but we'll kind of see. So I've got 10 edges here, and I'm assuming I'm still going to have 16 here, so we're probably going to need a few more edges to make this work. So this is still a relatively low poly. I feel like I can probably still add a few more polygons going through the body here. I might start by adding one through there, just so we've got a little bit more geometry to work with in the groin area. Let's just sort of make this a little bit more sphere sort of shaped, or cylinder shaped, so this will fit in the leg a little bit better. I'm just going to start adding a few extra edges. We're up to 12. This should get us to 14. And then we just need another 2, and I think maybe I'll add them through there. Or maybe just slide these along a little bit. Okay. Just going to delete a ring of faces through here so that when I bridge these, I've got a little bit more room to work with. And actually, yeah, that seems to have not done a terrible job. I'm going to go and add an extra cut in there. And most of the time I do change this to linear. Like a lot of these, the bend surface and the bend path tends to give some slightly obscure results. Depends a little bit on what you're building, but in this case I'm just going to stick it with linear, and I'll do the sculpting myself, and I might just add another loop through there so this will sort of hold its shape a little bit better. Oh, and yes, I'm definitely going to be making his little sword, his little nail. That is such an iconic part of this character, it definitely needs to be in there. Okay, so let's go back to our reference here. His groin area needs to come down considerably lower, actually. Oh, good grief. Yes, the rain character that's recently been put out, that is an incredible rig. I'm not sure I've ever built anything quite that complicated, and yes, you're quite right, the mouth and everything is quite sophisticated. It's yeah, good grief. Got any tips on how to do it? Honestly, it's not one that you can really just sort of give tips for, because it's a fairly in-detailed one. Yeah, is there anything in particular that you'd like to know? Just because there's so many different parts to it that it's a very broad question. I'm not quite sure how to answer it. Specific questions I might be able to provide something for. And one of the things that the mirror modifier does is when you smooth through the middle, it kind of pulls it all in and gives it this sort of pinching effect. So you either need to kind of pull this down a little bit more manually, or oftentimes I just leave that, and after I've applied the mirror modifier, I go and then go and give it a smooth, because it just works a little bit better. Okay. That's feeling like we've kind of got our basic shape. I think I want to pull these arms in a little bit more. Let's go and turn on our soft selection. And let's just suck his shoulders in a little bit there. We can sculpt that back in. Okay, now I'm not actually going to bother joining his head to the rest of his body. They're such separate pieces, and then they get hidden mostly by this cloak. So I'm going to build the head as a completely separate piece. So I might just sort of cap this off. In fact, let's go and apply that mirror modifier so that I can sort of, oops, what's going on here? So that I can extrude this in a little bit easier. And again, like I said with the cylinders before, kind of causing pinching, I don't just want to, you know, merge these at the center. You'll end up with the same problem. Again, most of it will be hidden. It's possibly not too big a deal, but I'm going to try and use the grid fill. As you can see, that kind of offsets it a bit strangely, but if we just come in and go, hang on, I think we need an extra span in there. There we go, that's done a pretty good job. I'll change that to simple blending. And let's just add an extra loop in there to kind of hold that. And then I can come in and smooth that out. Okay, so I mean, for the most part, I think that gets our body done. It's a little hard to tell how the arms are going. I still feel like they might be a little bit too long, but once we've kind of got his sword and a few other things in there, it might become a little bit more obvious what needs to be worked on. What's this about the Rain character? Controls in the lips to have some better pose expressions. Let me just mull over that one while I make a start on the head, because it's faces are always so difficult. I mean, a lot of the time when I build them, I actually use shape keys rather than using the bones, just because it's so much easier and faster to set up, but it also doesn't give you as much control, which is kind of the problem. So to get this head shape, I'm going to go and add a subdivision modifier, set it to simple. Now, why is that not showing my wireframe? Oh, of course, because I've got the optimal display on. Yep. And then go and apply another subdivision modifier. And that should get us something that's a little bit more square. Okay, let's apply all of that. And let's start shaping this thing a little bit. Yeah, the cool thing about the Rain character is it's got so many levels of detail. Like you have to build you kind of build your large overarching shapes. Like, it's just not that this is the best character to use as an example, but you know, you might have 3 or 4 main controllers going, say, above an eyebrow ridge. And then you might have, you know, one control that's, you know, kind of does the whole jaw, but then parented under those controls, you'll have another, you know, 4 or 5 controls that you can then use to manipulate the lips. And then underneath those will each have another 2 or 3 bones, which can then be manipulated. And like every controller on the face has all of these multiple levels going on. So, I mean, that is really all it is. It is bones, parented under bones, parented under bones, and there's just got to be so much work involved in the skin weighting process. That's the part that I hate. Skinning weights is just horrible. But yeah, I mean, it's not a difficult process in terms of there's lots of steps involved, or there's, you know, lots of different steps involved. It's basically the same steps. It just repeats and nests underneath each other again and again and again to give you this finer and finer detail. So yeah, it's not difficult so much as it is just time consuming. I think that's the real tip there, is that it's just, if you want to make a character like that yourself, it's going to take time, and you just kind of need to be prepared for it to take that time. I'm hoping that gives you some kind of an answer. I don't feel like it's the best one, but it's a difficult one because it takes a long time to to learn all the different steps that are involved in making something like that work. How flat is the top of that head? That head top is quite flat. I'm just going to smooth this face out a little bit. One of the questions that got asked on the forums when I kind of put out a, hey, I'm going to be answering questions, you know, feel free to ask some questions early. One of the questions I got asked was about tablets. You know, what's a good tablet? What's a good place to kind of start with that, you know, that kind of hardware. I'm just saying, even though I'm using the sculpting tools at the moment, and I do have my tablet sitting here in front of me, and there's a delay on the stream, so I can't actually see whether you can see this or not, but yeah, I haven't actually used it yet. I'm still just using my mouse, and probably until I get up to the cloak, I'm probably not going to be using the tablet too much for this kind of a character. So I mean, that's my first thing. That yes, tablets are awesome, but I think people kind of get a little... I think people get distracted by the technology sometimes, and they go... A lot of the time they've heard, oh, you know, if you want to do good character sculpting, you know, that high-level detail, you know, you've got to get yourself a tablet. And I mean, once you get to, like, some really deep detail, like pores and wrinkles and muscle definition, yeah, a tablet does become helpful. But there's so much that you can do before you actually need to get to that stage. And I think a lot of people avoid starting because they think that they need the technology. And they go and have a look at tablets and they go, oh my goodness, actually, I haven't looked at the price of tablets for a little while, but you know, back when I was first starting, they were like the really good ones, like the ones that is actually a screen itself. They were like $2,000. The price of them has definitely come down since then, thank goodness. Whereas like this one here, this is the Wacom, the One by Wacom, and I'm pretty sure it's their cheapest model. I managed to get this. It's a cheap model, and I managed to get it really cheap. I don't know whether anybody here is familiar with the supermarket Aldi. It's a supermarket. It's just kind of a strange place to get a tablet. But every now and then, Aldi just does these kind of random special deals. Let's just go with one level of subdivision for now. Yeah, so I got this at a like incredibly low price. I think I paid like $40 or $50 for it. And I did have a look at this particular tablet before jumping on the stream, and I think if you like go and get it now, you're probably looking at more like about $80. So I think I did get a particularly good deal. But my point is that like this is an incredibly cheap tablet, and I use it all the time, and I don't know, I feel like I get some decent results out of it. You know, you don't need to go and spend the $2,000. Like, again, I don't know whether you guys can see this particularly well, but I mean, it's literally a very small drawing tablet. It doesn't have buttons. It doesn't have all the macro buttons and everything on it. Like, this is kind of the cheapest thing you can get, and it does a good job. So again, I just kind of want to emphasize that whole, you don't need to be spending lots and lots of money to get a decent result. Like, if you want to, first of all, if you haven't done it before, just make a start with your mouse. You can get reasonably good results with a mouse, particularly if you're doing simple characters. And once you feel like your mouse is kind of holding you back a little bit, which eventually you will kind of get to that point, then maybe look at spending money on a tablet, but, you know, don't spend a lot of money on a tablet straight away. go and spend, you know, somewhere between $20 and $100. Like, if I was able to get this for 40 or 50 bucks, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to, say, maybe get a second-hand one for $40. So yes, my advice is go get a cheap tablet. There's lots of cheap tablets. There. 3D fan, what's this? I can relate to that. It took a while to understand how far you can go with just a mouse. Yeah, absolutely right. Like, you can do a lot with just a mouse. And I don't know whether this is a myth or not. I kind of heard it at one of the 3D convention things. But, what was the film called? Nuts, now it's going to escape me. Was that one that was, probably 15 years or so back now? And it had a whole heap of shaky cam, and you never really actually got to see the monster. Something Street. No, it escapes me right now. It'll probably come to me in a little bit. But yeah, $2,000 for a tablet. Oh yeah, the $2,000 tablet is it's like the Wacom's best tablet, but it's literally a screen, and you draw on the screen. So it means that you don't have this, when I'm drawing on this tablet, I'm drawing down there and looking up there, I'm actually drawing on my screen itself. So, and I'm pretty sure that price has come down now. That was back when it was still all relatively new tech. But yeah, I mean, it's still expensive. This tablet here is only, if you went and bought it new, it's like $80. But yeah, that movie I was talking about, apparently the artist that made, these Hollywood level monsters, supposedly he did it all with a mouse. So I kind of go, if the Hollywood geniuses are able to do it, there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to do something like that. If you're not necessarily going for that highest level of detail. Is grid fill going to work here? Hey, look at that, grid fill works there. Now, how do I want to extrude this tiny little extra horn? Let's go and add an extra edge loop there. I feel like I kind of want a little bit more detail than that, but we'll work with what we've got. And again, just drop into sculpt mode to do a little bit of playing. I might just inflate that area a little bit. Yeah, there we go. I'm not quite sure what kind of, because all the Hollow Knight characters are kind of based on bugs. I'm really not sure what this guy's based on. Okay, cool. I think once we smooth that out, we will lose a little bit of volume, so let's maybe just, in fact, I need to apply my transforms here because it's trying to mirror across this object, which is obviously not mirrorable. So if I apply that, it goes and puts the mirror point down in the center. Now I can do that a little bit easier. Oh, good grief. All sorts of questions. What do we got? I don't know whether any of you guys watch Drawing with Jazza. I think his channel's just called Jazza now. But he was recently sponsored by Huion, and it's the first time that I've actually gone and looked at their tablets, and I got to say, I was considering getting one, because, yeah, as 3D Fan says, they're about $250 or something, and I think one of those was actually a draw on the screen deal, which I've always wanted to try. So, so 3D Fan, you managed to get one of those. Is that one of the ones to draw on the screen? Who's this? Is this Fritz? Venezuela. Hello, all the way from Venezuela. I didn't know I had anybody from Venezuela watching. Let's get rid of that sub D for a moment. And let's join the horn onto the head. Now, same as we did with the arms and the legs, I'm just going to kind of go and see. We've got 8 edges. 8 edges is always much easier to play with. In fact, I'm going to go back in the head a little bit. And I might just... Do I have... turn on my soft selection. I'm just going to scale this out a little bit, so I've got a little bit more room to work with. And shift that back somewhat. 2, 3, 4. Going to delete those faces. Just extrude them in a little bit. Oops. Turn off our soft selection for this. And I definitely need to make this whole thing a little bit bigger. I may need to sculpt some of this back into place, but I just need that to be much, much bigger right now. And now we can bridge. And again, just go into sculpt mode, and I can kind of a little bit more quickly smooth this out. We've lost a little bit of volume there, so... Oh, I don't have my mirror modifier set up yet. Hang on. Let's cut his head and go and apply a mirror modifier. There we go. Sorry, just kind of trying to keep up with the comments here. Oh yes, a $2,000, the Cintiq. Yes, that's the one. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many cheaper options these days. It's kind of like, oh, it was you know, my one day when I'm a rich man kind of dreams, and now it's like, you can still get a pretty decent something or other for, I think, yeah, around the $400 to $600, and it's like, yeah, that's probably a lot more manageable. It's probably just not quite worth going and sinking that kind of money anymore. You know, not unless I'm making millions off this one day. Hey, you know, let's hope. Okay, that all looks reasonably good. Yeah, so this is one of the regular problems kind of working with 2D. You don't always necessarily get a perfect mirror, whereas we're working in a perfect 3D environment, but I won't stress too much about that. And yoink. And have I still got soft selection on? Yes, I do. I'm just going to go and shift his neck up, kind of inside the head. Maybe not that much. Just like that. Maybe add an extra edge loop. There we go. That kind of gets us our hidden seam line in there. So let's get our eyes in here. So I'm going to want, looks like those ones, and yeah, I think those are the ones we want. Make sure you don't accidentally select the back ones. And I think I might try using the loop tools again here. Let's go circle. And yeah, actually that's doing a much better job than I thought. I've really only kind of fairly recently starting using the loop tools. I tried using it a little while ago and it kind of didn't work for me. I've honestly got no idea what I was doing wrong. Whereas in now it's like always works for me. I'm also going to add another edge loop down the middle there, just because I don't like having the eye geometry right pressed up against the quote-unquote nose. Not that this character is actually going to have a nose as such, but okay. Now this is a skull, so I mean usually I'd be doing some things with like manipulating and pushing it back into the skull, but I think in this case, if I go and look at some of my references, you can see that it's fairly well just cut straight in there, even on the 2D images. So I don't think I need to do too much here. I will just do a quick little inset so we've got a little bit of extra geometry, and then I think it's just kind of going to go fairly well straight back. Let's just make it a little bit straighter. Now we're not quite sure how to do like the interior of his head here, because I mean there's this whole thing about him being filled with the void. So I'm not sure whether he's like actually just got a a black face under there like the rest of his body, or whether it's actually like this hollow skull. So I'm not exactly sure the best way to deal with that just yet, but for now let's just add some holding edges. Let's do something like that. Apply a subdiv, and let's just smooth shade everything. And okay, that's starting to look not too bad. I feel like this edge here might be a little bit too strong. So let's just slide that back a little bit. Just want to soften that up just a smidge. That's probably not too bad. Where's my live stream gone? Okay, so Sunny Striker is saying that the skull is hollow, so why not? It probably doesn't matter too much, so let's stuff it. Let's go and make it hollow. So how far down do we want it to go? We want it to have a little bit of depth in the eye. Not too much, but still a little. Let's go with maybe about there. And then we can extrude it and just kind of scale that out so that we get this kind of an effect. Just shift that back a little bit. And that'll kind of give the impression that it's hollow without actually having to, I could go and add a solidify modifier to this, but that's probably okay. We may have to play with lighting, or maybe even put like a sphere or something in there a little bit later to get that darkness, but we'll just kind of see how that all goes. Now, how's the rest of this body going? Portions kind of feel just a little bit off. It kind of feels like the legs should be a bit longer. But it does kind of all match up there. So I don't know, maybe does he have a more rounded body perhaps? Yeah, I think maybe he needs to be a little bit thicker. Any tips on what to study to have amazing animation like Pixar or DreamWorks? Okay. In terms of getting that good, keeping in mind that I'm not that good yet, there's a lot of kind of levels that you've got to get through. I can remember being at a talk from a guy who fairly recently got himself a job at Pixar. And he was saying that there's kind of this, I mean, it's not like a rule or anything, as in, there's a law about it. But there is just kind of this general, the amount of time it takes seems to be about 10 years. It took him 10 years before he got to the point where he had a job at Pixar. And keeping in mind, this is a guy who'd just come from a job at Industrial Light and Magic. I don't know how familiar you guys are with ILM, but like they're the guys that did Jurassic Park, and they're one of the big players. I think just fattening him up a little bit's kind of fixed a few of those issues. So I mean, this dude had been working, at Hollywood level, one of the best companies on the planet, and it was like, yeah, but you're not quite ready for Pixar. Which kind of goes to show what insane standards they have. But I mean, that was mostly because he'd been working on Hollywood films, and I think he'd been working on like Hellboy or something back then. This is obviously a few years back now. and he was obviously going to go and try to work on cartoony things, so the style didn't quite match. That was more, it wasn't so much that he didn't have the skill for it, it was just the wrong style. But the point was that it took him 10 years to get to that point. And if you have a look at Pixar themselves, if you look at their story, they go from like, you're creating funny little cartoon commercials and stuff for advertising products, and then it's 10 years before they get to the point of making Toy Story. And you just find that this seems to happen a lot, that there's kind of this 10-year between starting and making something amazing. And I feel like I'm kind of going through something similar at this point, because I've been running a business for 10 years. I've been doing 3D animation for a little bit longer than that. And it feels like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of clicking, and there's things that are getting easier, like the Spyro sculpt that I did a couple of months back now. Like, it feels like a year ago I wouldn't have been able to do that, and things have just kind of come together. So a huge chunk of it is just time. You've got to sink a lot of time into it. I'm going to do his sword next, because I'm really kind of a little bit worried about doing his cloak, so I'm just going to avoid it. So I know in here somewhere I've got, which one was a really good, there, this one. This one's a really good one to do his sword off of. Yeah, so what you got to remember is that your Pixar level kind of stuff is, it's an accumulation of lots and lots and lots of stuff and learning. I'm just going to pull this off to the side so it's not interrupting things. And let's just tilt this a little bit. This won't be perfect reference, but it'll be pretty close just to get our kind of sizing and everything right. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of learning, you've kind of got to go through your basic stuff first, like hey, this is how you extrude and cut edges and edge loops, and learn your topology, and you should have edge loops around eyes, and some of the more the technical sort of stuff, learning how to use your tools essentially. And then you kind of want to start looking into, I mean, it depends which field you want to go down. If you're looking to do the character stuff, which is kind of more your Pixar stuff, then you want to start looking into actual character design and composition, lighting, color theory, a whole bunch of that sort of stuff. Some of that is the harder things to wrap your head around, just because there's not a lot of really good content out there, or at least not free, easy content. If you want, I would argue some of the best tutorials on this, go check out some of the Blender Guru ones. He's got a series on lighting, which is today the best video series that I've ever seen on lighting. And I mean, at the moment, one of the things that I'm starting to try to wrap my head around is your anatomy. I've done a whole bunch of these kind of characters that are relatively simplified. So I mean, he doesn't have a lot in terms of actual anatomy. So I'm currently trying to wrap my head around that. That's another thing that you're going to want to eventually learn. So I mean, this is why it takes your potential 10 years. It's an accumulation of so much stuff, and it just kind of takes time to get there. I'm hoping that is a reasonable answer without being too discouraging. I feel like that could be a little bit depressing. Because I don't think anybody wants to hear, oh yeah, it's just going to take frickin' forever. Oh yes, all hail Blender Guru, Lord of the Donuts. Yes, very much so. Get this stupid thing out of the way. But I gotta say, it's some of his other videos, because he's also got something on composition and I think color theory, and those were also really, really good videos. So I suppose he's kind of got the whole bloody pipeline covered there at that point, doesn't he? It's like, Yes, start here with a donut and finish off with character composition. Okay, I'm just going to want to, okay, like we've done before, delete that. I've got this reference in kind of a strange spot. Let's just shift that out of the way a little bit. I'm going to go, come on, grid fill, and always gives it a strange offset. I always find that it's just wrong a little bit. Is that the one that I want? Okay, let's maybe go with that for now. And I'm noticing that as I'm zooming in here, I'm starting to get clipping, so let's just make our clipping a little bit wider. Oops. Okay, hopefully that'll give us something decent. Again, just add a few extra edge loops in here, and I'll specifically add another one here to kind of hold that shape a little bit. A little bit the same down here, and I think I'm just going to tilt this slightly, just because I think that'll look cool. And let's maybe bevel that edge. Again, just a few holding loops. Okay, that should give us something close. And then I think the handle is probably round. But the rest of this will just scale down so that it gets a little bit of a point. And I think I want that a little bit pointier. Let's just sculpt in the point. Oh, hey George, thank you for joining us. I don't know if anybody else has been following some of the work George has been doing, but he's been doing some live streams of his own and making some very cool character base meshes, which are also available for download for free if anybody was interested in checking those out. I know I've gone and got a copy of all of them for later use. Okay, that's probably okay for the nail. I do kind of want to put these cracks in here. Now we can either, we could sculpt those details, I could try polygon modeling them, we could just do it with a texture. I don't know, does anybody have any preferences as to how we go about doing that? Let's just leave that for now. I probably don't need that reference anymore. I feel like that is very, very small. Let's get you back up to a more normal size. In fact, let's look at some of our reference here and go. I mean, he's sitting down there, but it kind of goes from the top of his head to roughly where his backside would be. I mean, that's actually freaking huge. So it's probably somewhere about that size. I mean, he does kind of have that Final Fantasy cloud thing going on where it's like, yeah, my sword is just far too big for my proportions. You see there, it really looks like his arm would be very, very small. Anyway, that's ultimately where it's going to end up, so... actually, here we go. Now, what am I talking about? I've actually got the freaking reference in the background here. Let's just match it to that. Yeah, there you go. So it was even bigger than I thought. There you go. You've got a ridiculously big sword now. Congratulations. Let's turn that subdiv back on just because that's annoying me. Okay, so now we're up to that fun part where I'd like to see this in Sculpt. Oh, alright, alright. Alright, let's actually get this Sculpt in then. So let's put you back to that shape. We'll smooth shape. We'll get rid of the... Now, what's the best way of doing this? I think let's get rid of the subdiv. Let's go and add a multi-res. We're going to want to crank this up fairly high because these are fairly minute details that we're going to be adding. I'll bring back my reference here. In fact, let's just go here. I'm going to go and apply my scale so that now I can kind of bring this back down to the reference size, and then I can just hit Alt-S later on and bring it back. Okay, so, and hopefully, now it is said that you should have your scale applied before you start playing with a multi-res. Okay, I'm just going to duplicate that as a backup, just in case this goes south. I actually haven't tried this before. So let's go subdivide, subdivide. Let's turn off optimal display so I can actually see how subdivided I'm taking this. Yeah, that looks stupid amount of detail. That should be enough. Let's go in here. Alright, so now I am actually going to start using my tablet. So this should be fairly simple. Like, we just want to draw a crack through there, a couple of little cracks, one through there. And see, again, this is one of the fun things with your 2D images. Like, literally every single one of these images that you look at, the cracks are different. Although, no, there is some consistency. There's that one, and there's that one. Those ones look like they're about the same. So I don't know whether I don't know what it looks like on the back. That's kind of the problem. But that's probably not too big a problem. We might just wrap it all the way around and see how this goes. Alright, let's jump into Sculpt mode. And that's going to annoy me, so let's turn off wireframe. And I've got mirroring on at the moment, so let's make sure that we don't have symmetry on. And this is going to start somewhere down about here. And I'm using the crease tool. In fact, let's just do a quick test. No, I'm going to want a lot more pinch on that, probably a bit more strength. How's that look? It's getting there, but I think we just want to pinch it to buggery. Alright, let's kind of get this in here. And it goes up to about here somewhere, and cracks off in that direction, and that cracks off in that direction. And then we've got another one down here. There we go. Okay, so those are some basic cracks. Let's just go, because we don't have any reference for the back, so this is the point where we just kind of got to make some stuff up. I don't mind making some stuff up. Might just bring this one down a little bit further, maybe even have it crack off again, and bring that one around. And maybe we'll just leave that there. Maybe have this keep cracking down in this direction. And again, just kind of spiral it off a little bit. And I don't know, let's maybe have this one go pretty much all the way around. And why not? Let's have it crack off in a slightly different direction. Okay, so that kind of gets us our basic shape. And because it hasn't pinched it quite as much as I would have liked, I'm just going to go grab the pinch brush and pull some of this detail in. Now this is kind of a crazy amount of detail to have on a, oh, hang on, I'm on the wireframe. On a relatively simple object, so if you were going to either be animating this or putting it in a game or something, you would definitely want to be coming back and either retopologizing this so that the geometry has the cracks in it, or probably using a material like a normal map, and I might even do that just because this is a stupid amount of geometry for a relatively simple thing. Okay, that just kind of looks a little bit weird. Okay, that's not too bad. And yeah, I think particularly from a distance that will be... Yeah, that looks cool on the back. Yeah, I like that. Now I did notice that some of the references look like they've just got a little bit of a crack on the handle. Although I think this one came from like the fan wiki, so I don't know whether that's like, you know, canon. Not that I'm too concerned about that. Okay, I think we'll leave that as it is for now, and the cool thing is obviously we can turn that multi-res on and off, and later we can use this multi-res to bake out some normal maps. So let's get rid of you. You're not really needed. We'll leave that on because it's not really lagging my scene much at the moment. I'm just going to go and move this into a backup collection just in case the scaling does some weird stuff for me later on, but I'm hoping if I just go Alt-S, yeah, that still looks like it's working. So we should be able to use that just fine. There you go, there's your big Final Fantasy-esque sword, nail, whatever. Alright, now for the fun part, which I've kind of been dreading this whole time. Let's work on this cloak. In fact, good grief, it's already been our first hour. You should always get up and have a little bit of a stretch after every hour. So, if anybody's got any questions they want to throw out, maybe now might not be a bad time. And while you're kind of typing away at that, because I know there's like a 20-second or so delay, I'm going to go and grab this little dude. And this will be fun because, again, there's the delay and I can't actually see what's appearing on the camera. But I had this little guy made for me a couple of weeks or so ago. One of my friends back in Melbourne has a 3D printer, and I got him to print my Spyro sculpt. You can probably see his wings needed a little bit of repair by the time he sent it up to me. This one actually broke off, and this one almost broke off. In fact, his horn broke off as well, but that was really easy just to glue back. I'm planning on painting this and getting rid of that glue and blue tack and stuff that's kind of all holding it together. But this isn't available yet because now that I've done the 3D print and seen it, I'm going to go in and take the model and like thicken up the wings and everything. But probably in about a week or so ago, I'll throw this guy up on my Gumroad page so that you can download the model and you can go and get your own 3D print done if you so feel like it. Yeah, my friend that did this, he's just got like a hobbyist printer, so I'll probably thicken up the wings and everything, and I might go get it done at I'm not even sure where to get it done yet, but a professional printer or something. So again, I don't know whether you can see this on the screen or anything, but like his armor and stuff had like little cuts and stuff taken out of it, and that detail, some of that detail has come through, but like all of his spots and even like his claws and everything, so much of this detail has really come through very, very nicely. So I'm really happy with how that's turned out, and I can only assume that a high quality printer would extract even more detail. So that'll be fun. And I suppose, God, that wing is really, it's very tentative. I may need to re-glue that at some stage. Yeah, while I'm talking about the Gumroad and stuff, forgive me, I'm not a fan of like advertising, but it's possibly worth saying that I do have both a Gumroad page and a Blender Market page where I've got like rigs and a character design tutorial series. If anybody wants to kind of get started with character design, this is kind of an entire pipeline from modeling and sculpting and UV unwrapping all the way through to a final animation. I don't know whether I've got that there. Yeah, rigging and all that sort of stuff. So, if you're interested in that, that'd be cool. Just a little heads up, there's a couple of the rigs and stuff that I've got on the Blender Market. The Blender Market doesn't have an option to put up free stuff, so these guys are available for like $5 and $3. But if you go to the actual Gumroad page, you have the option of downloading it for free, or it has a donation model as well. So whichever you are able to afford is perfectly fine. And there's a couple of other things in here from some of my other tutorials, like all the scenes that I did for the Minecraft scenes, if anybody is interested in that. Okay. All right. Like I say, I've kind of been dreading this, but let's go and have a crack at doing this cloak. Now, ultimately what I want is to have him end up in this pose. Heck, maybe I'm going to regret this, but alright, let's put the cloak off to one side again, because there's nothing quite like procrastination. Let's see if I can't get this guy rigged and put him in that pose, and then I can actually like sculpt the cloak around him, whereas in trying to sculpt the cloak now, once I move him I may have to re-sculpt it, and that can just be a bit of a pain. So let's just go and let's apply some basic materials just to kind of start with. The skull is probably not going to be particularly shiny, so about 0.8 roughness. Body, how shiny is he? I've never really stopped and looked at how shiny he is. And it's kind of hard to tell because so much of his stuff is really dimly lit. I suppose that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Like, he's void, if you're familiar with the lore of Hollow Knight. So he's probably kind of like darkness itself. He's probably not all that shiny. But you can see there's some shots here where he is like picking up rim lighting and stuff, so there's the skull. Did I? No, let's go. Let's call it void material. Let's go and make that black. And what do we want? Somewhere around there. And I'm probably going to reduce the spec down to around about 0.1. And then the nail is just kind of grey. How much shininess does it have? Well, it's actually, let me see, it's grey in that shot, but then it's white in that shot. It does, like, I mean, I think it is, I mean, it's called the nail, so it's probably a nail. So it's probably kind of a darkish. And we'll have it kind of a mid-shininess. And then obviously we need the interior of the skull. Yeah, I think I am going to need to add a sphere or something in there. Let's just go... What's the fastest way of doing this? Let's just go and apply that. Get them to share materials. And let's just kind of... Oh, I turned off symmetry before. Make sure that that's turned back on. Let's just kind of get that shape in there. I think I've taken it a little bit too far in some areas. And I might just push the eye sockets back in a little bit because I really want them to look... I want this skull to look like it's recessed. Okay. Yep, I reckon that's good. Okay. And I might just add another subdivision to that head. Yeah, that's better. It's just showing up a little bit of jagginess. Okay. So in none of the references you can really see his neck, but that's because the cloak covers it. So he looks a little bit weird at the moment because he's missing his cloak. But we will work on that. Alright, oh, here's something I should probably do. I've been working on this whole time and I haven't saved once. So if something goes wrong, that'd be really bad. Live stream Hollow Knight. You should save more frequently than I do. That's really bad. Really bad. Alright. Let us set up a very basic Rigify, basic metahuman. I think that's the right one. Just solo that. Yeah, cool. This is the one that doesn't have the face. So this has got far more control than we probably need, but let's get this set up. So viewport display in front. And so he's not going to need breasts. We can delete those. And so those, no, those knees are not in the right spot. All right. It's going to be a little bit of work in getting this set up. Get his hips in the right spot. Oh, where's my symmetry? Come back, symmetry. X mirror. There we go. That's better. I kind of want these to be placed kind of where like rib cages and stuff go. There. That's the top of his neck. And this one doesn't really matter so much, but let's stick that up there so we know that that's for his head. Alright. Elbow. Guess that's somewhere about there. Let's hide his ginormous sword. Make sure this is working. Let's hide his head too. What am I looking at there? Oh, that's right, and he's got the interior of his head as well. There we go, now I can see what I need. So let's get all of this pushed aside a little bit. And from the right. Always make sure that you've got a little bit of a bend in your knees and elbows, otherwise the IK constraints don't know how to work. He doesn't really have toes as such, but I've never tried deleting the toe control before, so I might just leave that there, just in case it breaks the rig. Yeah, you possibly noticed before that the default rig comes with like breast controls. You don't actually need those. You can delete those and everything will still work. And you can do the same thing with the more advanced rig that comes with like the facial controls. You can delete the facial controls and Rigify is still smart enough to go, oh, you've deleted those controls, but presumably you still want everything else. Alright, so let's save that. I'll still have you hidden. And let's go. Now for this, we could either, like, we could literally just use this rig here now, and that's probably, like, it would work for our purposes, but I will just try and generate the rig here. And see what we get. So I don't need the meta rig anymore. Let's take the actual rig, move it into its own collection. And now we can bind that. Let's just go automatic weights. The head can just be straight up parented to, where's the head control? To head control, parent to bone. And now hopefully if I go and rotate that, yep, cool. The head still sticks. All right, make sure that you've got in front again so that you can see all your controls. You really don't need all of those controls visible. So which ones can I turn off here? Don't think I need those. Do need those. Want those. Yeah, get rid of those. Get rid of those. Want those. And where are the arms? That one. That one. And probably those two. There we go. That should give us something to work with. And I'm really not a fan of these things either, so I'm going to go in and hide them. Okay, so if I go and grab the arm, hey, look at that. That's actually pretty good. Not bad deformation for a just kind of default slap it together thing. That said, he is a very simple character, so yeah, I think we can make this work. Okay. Well, I suppose I should probably test that. And up body. Yeah, cool. Alright, I'm fairly happy. Let's go and reset him. Let's go and bring back giant sword. And what's our reference? Okay, so the sword is kind of off to the side in the reference. Let's just make sure that our pivot point is set at the bottom, and then we can rotate that 90 degrees, negative 90 degrees. Just kind of shove that on there. Eventually his hand is kind of going to get covered by his cloak here, so possibly doesn't matter that that kind of doesn't work, but we'll pretend that it does. Snap that to the bone, and now we can wiggle that. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with like proportions and stuff. I possibly don't need that reference anymore, so let's disable you for now, and let's go and pull in this one. And just scale that up a little bit. Yeah, that's probably okay. Alright, so now of course the head shape is like significantly smaller. Again, the joys of working with 2D. Okay, so let's get his arm. Let's go and stick this up somewhere about here. See, this is the thing, like, to get that sword roughly there, his arm's got to be down here somewhere. Again, this is, you know, the joys of working with 2D. You can kind of stick anything where you want. It doesn't matter too much. You can see that, like, I mean, I could squish his body in a little bit there, but it is a little, it's a little limited. I don't know, can I scale him? I can, but it scales everything. Okay, so that's a little bit of a bother. We're just kind of going to have to go with it a little bit. So let's get his leg. And get this one off to the side a little bit. Can I scale? Yeah, I can actually scale him a little bit. Can also shrink that. Oh, maybe this is what I can do. Can Can I shrink his waist a little bit? Gotta remember that your rigs do actually have, you know, quite a lot of additional controls, like in terms of shrinking and scaling and everything. And it's kind of, they can be really helpful for trying to hit some of these poses. Obviously that looks ridiculous at the moment. Don't worry, I will be doing another sculpt over before this is finalized. So some of this is going to be because parts of his body are leaning forward and they're closer to camera. And then some of it is just kind of, it doesn't necessarily work. Let's kind of tilt his head. Which way is he looking? I think he's actually looking down that way a little bit. Okay. I may need some of these additional controls now, so that we can actually kind of play with some of these things. So I grab that. There we go, I can make him look a little bit chubbier. And I know, where are my leg controls? No, not that one. And was it that one? Cool. So yes, now we have these additional controls where we can kind of come in and shove him into place a little bit more. I don't think I'm going to be able to get him up quite that high. But I'm hoping that we can get something a little bit closer than what we've currently got. And then we can use some of these controls to actually make him fatter in certain areas. There we go. I want to turn his pole vector constraints on, just because I currently don't have control over his elbows, and now I do. Let's go front. I feel like this arm, I kind of want it to bend down. I feel like maybe there's something similar going on here. There we go, that's a little bit better. Okay, it's got a bit of a strange butt thing going on here. There we go, that kind of helps. Okay, I feel like that's, I mean, it's still going to need a bit of refining, but I think that's far enough along that I can start doing this accursed cloak. What's this? Maybe his left arm. Hang on. So his left arm is pointing backwards. That's why it looks shorter. Oh, yeah, I can see what you're saying there, and I reckon you're right too. Let's give that a whirl. Let's pull that back so that it's like back here somewhere. And then, whoops. These arms actually needed to be a little bit longer. Again, we can come back and do a little bit of a sculpt over to fix that, but I think, yeah, who's that? I think Sunny Striker is definitely onto something there. Let's pull this back so that we've still got a little bit of an elbow there. Something similar going on here where this, yeah, because I mean that's still basically in line with his head, so let's thrust that forward a little bit. And whoops, let's maybe turn that a little bit more towards the camera. It's kind of matching up a little bit better. Maybe we do a little bit of the same with the legs. Let's. He's definitely got this whole I'm launching towards the camera kind of feel. That's starting to look a little bit more like a power pose. The wrist still looks a little bit odd. Make sure that we're working on local. Okay. I'm going to have to jump onto the cloak because I am starting to become aware that we maybe don't have as much time as I thought. So let's see what we can do. Let's hide this rig for a moment. Let's see what we can do about getting this cloak. So we do have this thing that needs to wrap around his neck and then flow backwards. So what's the best way to start by doing this? I mean, it's probably... with most of these things, probably start with a plane of some sort. And it's going to eventually end up, you know, something crazy like that. Now, in terms of actually getting that to wrap around, the fun part with this cloak is that every time you kind of look at it drawn, it's just that little bit different. So I mean, these two are reasonably close, but this one looks a lot more like rags or something, whereas this almost looks like tentacles. In fact, somebody's kind of done an interpretation of it where it's much more tentacle-like. Oh, sorry, no, this is the one that's really tentacle-like. Anyway, I'm going to try and sculpt this instead. So You can see that kind of wraps around there and flows down. Or in our case, it's floating back upwards. So let's start by splitting this and go extrude. Do this in such a way that it splits as it comes around the front. In fact, I think I'm going to want a little bit more than that. There we go, that should give us something a little bit more to work with. Really just kind of trying to block out these shapes at this point, and worry about adding the detail and stuff a little bit later. So I can see that eventually... Ooh, hang on, I've got some extra vertices here I don't need. Eventually I'm going to want this to kind of wrap around, so let's go to the top view. I'm actually going to duplicate this and actually go and wrap it there, and then I can select that edge and just go with a bridge and add a few extra cuts in there. I wonder if I can go with the bend path or anything here to... not especially, although it is probably slightly better. Gets me kind of halfway there. I want to make sure that if I'm sculpting, I'm not using symmetry at the moment. Okay, cool. That's getting us somewhere at least. Let's pull that down a little bit so that it all kind of wraps. And we need to do something similar to this side. But instead, this one will actually wrap in underneath. So, whoops. Come on. In under the neck a little bit, and then grab this one, and where do we ultimately want this one to end up? This to end up tucking in underneath, so somewhere about there. Okay. Ugly so far, but that is how a lot of these things kind of start their lives. Okay, let's add a few extra edge loops. Just try to get it a little bit square. Alright, let's see what I can do about starting to kind of get this sort of roughly into place, like really roughly into place. I'm just going to go and hide that body so I can see this outline a little bit better. We know that we need this to pull kind of all the way down here. Keeping in mind that we don't exactly have a one-to-one match here, so we may have to, you know, make stuff up a little bit. But that's actually not terrible as kind of a starting point. Now, one of the things that we really need to get in to make this work properly is these little spiky tassely bits. So I think to achieve that, we're just going to need to extrude some parts out. So let's go back to the front view and let's just kind of find where these need to come from. So I reckon there's one there. Whoops. That can ultimately end up down there. We've got another one somewhere about here. Oops. What else have we got? Let's extrude that one out. Oops. Three. That one's probably fine by itself. Oops. Something similar back here. Let's go with okay, let's get this reference out of my way. Oops. Okay. I'll just turn my wireframe on so I can see this a little bit better. I'm not going to worry. You definitely have some more tassels coming out the back here, but I'm not going to worry too much about that, just because we're not going to be able to see it from the camera view. Okay. Gonna try. In fact, let's go make a little duplicate of this and go and stick this in the backup so that we know that we're not going to ruin this. And I'm going to try remeshing. Now I don't know what voxel size I want here. I usually find that that's not set enough. That's definitely not set enough. In fact, before we do that, I'm also going to go and add a solidify modifier, just because sculpting tools don't necessarily play that well if you don't have a little bit of thickness. So let's apply that, go back into sculpting, and let's set this like 0.01 and remesh, and ooh, good. Okay, that's a little too high. In fact, what am I saying? We've got these new tools now. I can use this Shift R to kind of get a better idea. There we go, remesh. Okay, cool. So now we've got something I can kind of work with. I can use these. Oh, I want to make sure I've got Dyntopo on, and now I can No, I want constant detail. I want it to stay at about that level of detail. Now I can pull some of these things out and just kind of dynamically build this as we go. Throw in another one or two just because it feels kind of weird not having all of these tassels. Stuff it. We won't actually see these, but I'll just kind of lazily pull a few extras out. And that's going to give me some guides in a minute. Because the next thing, I'm going to want to try and sculpt in some of these little ridges. So use the inflate tool. Let's maybe crank that strength up a bit. Let's actually paint in some thickness here. Oh, and I accidentally joined the meshes a little bit over here. Let's just bulk those up until they kind of merge back together. There we go. I might just solo this. And just going to go and move over to my crease tool and just add a little bit of extra detail here. I might just turn off wireframe so that I can see this a little bit clearer. Just make sure that my shapes and everything are still kind of reading okay. Okay, it's possibly looking a little bit lumpy, but it's actually not as bad as I thought it might get. Let's unhide everything. We've got all of that. Now I will need to just shuffle this around his arm and stuff. Drape this a little bit, and what we've sort of got, I've brought back that reference, hang on. of a raise up as we go through here. Just make sure we are kind of covering that neck, because you never really see his neck. Because this is sculpted and I don't really have time to do a remesh, let's go smooth. Just give that a few smooths. And okay, I possibly shouldn't have tried to add a subdivision modifier. This is not quite the right geometry for it. Let's just cancel that. There we go. Oops. Let's go and give it its own material, and I might just try and steal a color off there a little bit. This thing's going to be very rough. I can't imagine it's going to have much spec at all. I still really want that to be pressed up against the neck. Okay. Now I am aware that I'm kind of getting close to going over my scheduled time here. So I'm aware that all of this could definitely do with a lot more polish, particularly that cloak, which is not overly surprising. But I did really want to show off how to create this kind of fog kind of effect, so I'm going to jump in and do that. And once I've got that set up, I may just kind of leave it there. Now that armature should be before the subdiv. There we go, that's much smoother. Okay, so let's get some lighting and such set up. What's this sitting under? Go to reference. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to still have this kind of open on one side. Just so I can kind of use that as my own reference, but that's ultimately what we're going to be trying to build. So, first thing we want to do, let's get our fog set up, because to get those kind of sunbeams going through there, we're going to need fog. So let's create a cube. Let's just scale this up a reasonable amount. In fact, let's also, well, just so everybody can see what's going on, I'm going to change this visibility to bounds, so now we can actually see in there. And let's go and create a camera so that we know exactly where we need our fog to be. So let's just kind of line that up a little bit. And yeah, our fog does not need to be quite that big. Probably about there somewhere. Okay, let's just make sure that I am in fact using Eevee for this. I find these volumetrics are actually a little bit easier to set up in Eevee, which is a little unusual. Most things in Eevee are actually harder to set up, but obviously faster. But volumetrics, one of the few things that I really like doing in Eevee. So we don't need the principled for this, we want a principled volume. Let's go and stick that into the volume slot, and you can see we start to get some stuff. It's pretty much always way too dense to start with, so putting it down to around about 0.1, 0.2 is probably an okay place to start. Let's also just zoom in on this a little bit. Let's swap this over to rendered. You can see we've already got some lighting in here. That's because I've got one of these kind of HDR set up as a default. So if I switch that off, we now completely disappear. Now for creating volumetrics, there's you generally don't want to be using the sun, the sun light. You either want to be using a spotlight or a point light or an area light. I've kind of played around with this a little bit beforehand. I'm actually going to use a point light. Spotlight is kind of the next best choice. But you can see this kind of gives me some interesting lighting straight off the bat. Now we want this kind of off to the side, which means we're going to want it to be much stronger. Something a little bit like that. And I also like to increase its radius, just so we get some softer shadows. Let me just go back to the 3D view here and just make sure that this is kind of out the front a little bit, so it's lighting in from the front. And I might even just pull this down a little bit further, because to get these actual beams of light, that might be a bit much. We're going to need to add kind of a filter between here. I'm also going to go and change my light color to something about there. Let's go and grab our volumetrics, and let's start by just adding a little bit of more variety to the volume. Plug the factor into the density. Now I find that this usually massively overcranks it, so I also like to just throw a math node in here so that I can kind of put this down to like 0.1 or 0.05 or low. Oh, sorry, I've got this set to add. Set it to multiply, and now 1 is kind of your default value, and then you can kind of crank it up or down. Let's go with about 0.2. And maybe just crank our scale up until we can sort of start to see a little bit of detail in there. Okay, that gives us something. So let's go and create something that we can kind of use to block the light a little bit. You can see already we're getting these interesting beams that are sort of shooting off. We just want to emphasize that. I might still pull that light down a little bit further. Stick that plane. There we go. But obviously that just blocks all the light. That's no good. So let's go and add a new material to this. Where is it? And go noise. Let's just kind of solo this. Plug that into the color for a moment. Oh, we do actually need a light to be able to see it. I'm just going to go and turn the world back on for a moment so I can actually see what's going on. I actually want factor, not color. Grab a color ramp. I'm going to set this to constant. Now I'll actually get some hard edges, and I can use this to sort of create a filter for my light to pass through. So we're just kind of middling that a little bit, and then instead of putting it into the color, I want to change that and plug it into the alpha. Now that won't work straight away because this is EV, and we need to make sure that we've set our blend mode to something. Alpha, hashed, or blend tends to work the best. I'm going to go with hashed in this case. And now, as I kind of fiddle around with this, you can see that we're starting to get some of those beams of light passing through. And now it's just kind of a little bit of tweaking back and forth to determine how bright you need things to be to really penetrate that light, or to penetrate the fog, and then going back and forth with the fog to go, okay, is it too dense? Is it not dense enough? I'm going to go with something a little bit like that. I've obviously got this world on at the moment. There we go. That's giving us some slightly better light beams. And I might set this to about 0.1, just so we've got a little bit more light in the scene. When you've got fog, you really do need to crank your lights up a lot. And I might go with that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so a smaller radius also gives us stronger beams. So that will kind of blur it out a little bit. Let's go with, like, I don't know, 0.25 or something. Even smaller. And contact shadows should always be on if you want a certain amount of quality. I've lost my fog. There we go. So I've got those looking reasonably nice. Do I want the fog denser? Something like about that. Okay, so that kind of gets us our foggy sort of effect. Now we also want to get these little dust particle sort of things in there. And for that, we're going to need another cube. In fact, I'm just kind of getting a little bit mixed up with all my stuff here. Let's just go new collection, fog. And so now I want a new cube. We will scale you up as well. I will also change you to bounds. I'll just leave it a slightly different shape so I can kind of tell it apart from the fog. Let's just call you an emitter. I might go and add a new collection for this as well. Call it particles. And I just want to create a circle and give it an n-gon to fill it with something. And I'll shift this out of the way, maybe make it a bit smaller, give it a material. I'm actually going to delete the principled and go and throw an emission shader on this. And I don't know, let's start by setting it to 5 and we'll see how this goes. So now I just want to use these as particles in here. So let's go create a new particle system. Probably about 250 or so particles. Set the end time to 1 so that they're all already created. And then we want to go down to our render object. Let's just make sure that this is called particle so it's a little bit easier to find. Now I can just type in particle and go, boop, there's my particles. And where are they? Oh, there we go. I just needed to quickly rewind in the playback. Also, when you've got this set to bounds, it sets everything to bounds, including your particles on the inside. So that's, you either need to set it to textured so that you can see it, or you can kind of just imagine it a little bit with the wireframe. You can see at the moment they're all coming out at really weird angles. I kind of just want them to be facing straight towards the camera. So let's go back to our particles, go and add rotation, and what we want to go global, which direction is this? Y, I think. I just need to play with this for a moment. Okay, let's just be clever here and let's just rotate this 90 degrees. Oh, hang on, you're not going to let me be clever? That's a bit rude. Okay, no, let's change this to object. Now when I rotate it, there we go. Okay, so those stick. That's better. Okay, so these are way too big now. We want these to be quite small. And at the moment, you can see they're sticking to the outside, so make sure that we go to source and change that to volume, and now they're all on the inside. Yep, it's set to random. Okay, so now if I go into rendered, I will need to change this, what, to bounds? No, sorry, to textured. There we go. Okay, cool. So yes, no, so rather than playing with that in there, now that we've got that set up, let's go to viewport display. This is what we want, and we don't want to show the emitter. Now I can probably shrink that down a little bit. Okay, so I'm really not liking where they are in the world. Let's just play with this a little bit and add a little bit of random. And to kind of get this blurry effect, a little bit of a combination of, where is it, bloom, turn on your bloom, increase the radius a bit, increase the intensity, and depth of field. Cool, depth of field is on. Where's my camera? Select the camera, turn on depth of field. We'll just kind of focus on the skull, and let's turn our f-stop down, and you can see that those start to blur. And that's kind of what we want. Okay, I feel like I'm still not getting enough light in here, so let's maybe crank this up. I'm gonna go with that. Whoa! Okay, that's too much. And I might just... Where's my fog? No, that one's the fog. I'm just going to lower the fog a little bit. And heck, I might even... Just so it's a little bit less dense around him. There we go. Ultimately, you would probably do a lot of this work in Photoshop, but I kind of wanted to show how to do it in 3D. So now, the other thing that we can do, just because I'm not really liking the contrast here, I'm just going to go and add a plane to start with. Scale that up. Just go shove it into the background a little bit. And I'm just going to go and set that to black. There we go. That also kind of helps us be able to see some of our light beams and stuff in here. Now, final things, just so we can kind of get this looking a little bit better, we can kind of go down to color management, and we can add some higher contrast, make our lights pop, our darks a little bit darker. Where's our point light? I still feel like... I'm going to crank that up to whatever we're up to, 20,000. No, that's just kind of lighting there. So I might also just duplicate our light here and just bring that out somewhere about there and really lower this down. Just want a little bit more light on the face there. And just push that background a little bit more. Oh, hang on, what did I select? Oh no, that's because there's too much light hitting it. Okay. Okay, I think that's going to be pretty close. I do just kind of want to move that particular glowy. Where is it? There. It's kind of sitting over the top of his face. Let's just go with something like that. And finally, we can always crank up like our exposure and stuff just a little bit. Let's go like 0.5. Okay. All right, guys. I'm pretty much straight after this live stream. I'm actually ducking off for a short holiday. Just going away for a long weekend with my girlfriend, and I'm looking at the time going, she's probably getting a little bit cranky with me. So big thank you to everybody who's rocked up and watched this. If you've got any last minute questions while I kind of let this sit there and render, throw them out now. And other than that, I will say thank you for coming. If people have enjoyed this, I may do it again. And I'm also realizing that doing this render is kind of breaking my live stream. Hold on a second. I may just need to cancel that. So, considering the damage that just did to the live stream, gonna put a pause on that, and let's just kind of go full screen here. And where's the camera? Where is the camera? And I'm just gonna turn that up, just so you can kind of get a... This is what it would probably look like if you were to render it. I'm actually kind of disappointed. I would have thought Eevee would be able to handle that, but maybe I'm throwing a little bit more at it than I anticipated. Anyway, there is your final image